here on the Made It in Music podcast with my friend Meredith Andrews here at Full Circle Music. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Seth.
I've been actually really, really looking forward to this because I know you. We've worked on some music together, but I haven't gotten to hear the full story ever, I don't think.
Oh, you want the full story?
I want the full story.
I mean, that's
why
a long story. I can try to condense it.
Well, just don't overshare.
Okay.
No, you can overshare. But us both being Enneagram 3s, we're both very task-oriented. Whenever we get in the studio, it's like work. So we don't often get the time to just sit and chat and hang.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited.
Yeah, so let's jump all the way back to the beginning. What was the first moment for you that music impacted your life and you knew that you had to do it, like you had to pursue it?
Well, I mean, I can go back to the first time that I ever sang a song at church. And the reason that ever happened was because my mom was on the worship team. I grew up in a tiny little church in North Carolina, 80 people, maybe. That was like a good Sunday, right? And my mom was one of the worship leaders, and she also helped with kids ministry. Because it's just kind of one of those places where you pull double duty if you're volunteering, and but she would practice all the time at home on her little karaoke machine with like 2 tape decks and 2 mic jacks and a speaker, that sort of thing. And I would listen to her, and I guess I would sing along, and whenever she was singing, I'd just be right there because I wanted to hear it, and I was drawn to it, and just even as a 5-6-year-old kid. And somehow ended up when I was 6 singing I Love You, Lord for special music at church. Special music. Yep. And so that's always been a really special song for me. It's simple, but it's like kind of where I started. And I want that to always be true. But yeah, it kind of morphed. I in a lot of ways, I ran from the idea of music. Not because I was in denial. I just thought, I don't want to just do this. I love music, and I think that it'll always be a part of my life. But I wanted to be a missionary. When I was a kid, I was like, I'm going to be a missionary. I always had a heart for like other nations, and I wanted to go on mission trips. And
did you have like family that was missionaries, or
no.
how did that even sort of?
Well, we would have missionaries come to our church, and they would talk about what God was doing in their countries, and I would cry. Like even as a kid, I would just sit there and cry, thinking about these people that had like so little compared to us, and we're experiencing the presence of God. And I just thought, I want to be a part of what God's doing in the world, And so it wasn't until I led worship through high school and college, but my junior year of college, I had a significant moment that marked me when I was leading worship on campus at Liberty, where I went to school. It was on Wednesday night, and I was singing a song I'd sung 1,000 times called Sing to the King. But something shifted in my heart that night as I was leading. I just felt like God was saying, this is what I've called you to. And I can only explain it by saying that it's the thing that when I'm leading worship and I'm watching people engage with God, like music is kind of the vehicle. It's the way that they're responding. It's the way that they're worshiping. It's worship isn't always synonymous with music, but it is a facet. Yeah. And as I was just seeing people encounter the presence of God as I was leading, I just felt like my heart came alive in a way that I was like, yeah, why would I not do this? Because this is when I feel closest to the Lord and feel like I'm coming alive right now. And, just as a side note, I think a lot of college kids will go, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life. And they'll just wrestle with that. But I think you just go, what do you want to do? Like, what's in your heart to do? What's the thing that makes you come alive? And for me, it's leading worship, not just music, but specifically leading worship through music, seeing people engage with God. I just go like, man, there's nothing better.
That's it. That's awesome. So what was the journey? Because doing, music just because you love it and it's your hobby and your passion, and doing it as a career are 2 very different things.
Right.
What was the journey into making it a career?
Yeah. Well, at some point, I think it became obvious to me that this was maybe what I was also gifted at the most. And so I was like, well, maybe I should just kind of explore this a little bit. And I had a lot of encouragement from people at college. And then I moved on to work at a church in Chicago. And was a worship leader there, and just got a lot of feedback from people on songs I was writing and the way that I was leading, and constructive criticism and just ways that I could grow. And I just started to kind of hone in on that. But when I was in Chicago leading worship at my church, I also started coming down to Nashville about once a month to write, and writing with Jason Ingram. He just invited me randomly because he had heard this album that I'd done when I was a senior at Liberty. He had gotten a copy of it, and granted, those things are packed away in my mom's attic right now, and it is what it is. You got to start somewhere.
Had you like sent one to him, or how? Did
No, I hadn't. The guy that produced my record was a friend of mine, Keith Smith.
Yeah.
And we were at Liberty together. He was on the worship team with me, and so he produced it, and I think he had sent it to Jason. So I just got an email from Jason randomly back in like 2006, and was like, "Hey, if you ever want to come to Nashville and write, I'd be up for it." And I'm like, "That sounds amazing," you know. So that's how it started, and he introduced me to Word and my first manager, and that was when I first started coming to Nashville and kind of exploring what it could look like.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know if you have said it in an interview or if it was just in a conversation somewhere, but you talk about this idea that, making it, the feeling that you've arrived, that it's actually an illusion.
Yeah.
Like arrival is an illusion. I love that you've said it like that. After having had success at radio and probably doing a lot of the things that you maybe dreamed of doing when you were a kid, how does that manifest itself? Like, how do you deal with that? Maybe just talk a little bit about that.
Well, we've already discovered that both of us are 3s on the Enneagram. So I think for people like us, there's always this, I could be doing more, and what's the next thing? And for us, we're very driven by doing something that's meaningful and that has purpose and carries weight. I know that I am. And I'll stay awake at night thinking about how I can make an impact in people's lives, and how I can not just influence people, but really just like what is my life about? It's that existential question. But yeah, I think the older I get, the more I realize that there's always going to be like the next thing, and there's always going to be something more that I could be doing. But what I'm learning and what I'm trying to grow in, and God has been so patient with me in this, is that I have to learn how to give my yes to the best thing. Because if I say yes to everything that comes across the table, then I'm ultimately burning myself out easily. I'm possibly taking an opportunity away from someone else. If I'm not listening, if I'm not going, God, is this actually what you've asked me to do? Is there an invitation from the Father in this offer or in this opportunity? And there's not, but I just go, well, it looks good on paper and I'm free, so might as well. But it might have been for somebody else, right? Yeah. And so I'm learning to just be really intentional about what I say yes to, especially as a wife and a mom. If I give my yes to something outside of my home, then I'm essentially giving my no to my family, unless they're able to come with me. But still, if I've got my kids on the road, my attention is divided. Right. So I think I'm just learning to surrender my FOMO, my fear of missing out, and going, God, what is it that you're calling me to? Because I don't want to waste my time on the good things. I want to spend myself on the best things and what I know that you've actually purposed for my life. And so I think that idea of arriving, getting to a certain point, if I could just have this, if I could just get here, it is an illusion. Because there will always be more this side of heaven. We won't really arrive until we step foot in heaven. But it's just this constantly, I think, asking the Lord, all right, God, what is it that you've asked me to do? And what is it that you've asked me to say no to? And where are the seasons of rest and where are the seasons of fruitfulness? Because we need both. And I need seasons of rest because that's where I gain revelation from God that will manifest itself in those fruitful seasons. But if I'm constantly just looking for the fruit, constantly looking for the things to do, then I'll miss the growth and I'll miss the intimacy and I'll miss the rest that I so desperately need,
Yeah, that's a great answer. So Man, can you talk a little bit about your decision-making process in those moments? Because obviously, prayer is a huge part of
Yeah.
it, but like what makes you say yes to something and no to something else?
Yeah. Sometimes it feels like a little bit of a nebulous thing to me, and I'm still kind of pinpointing. But I was even talking to my mom about something the other day, and I was talking about how, like, Mom, I just need strategy. I need God to give me strategy. And she's like, well, He might give you strategy, but He might just give you peace. And I think it's really important that we lean in and follow peace. Like, do I have a peace about saying yes to this? If I read over this email, this invitation, this opportunity, and then I just sit with it for a minute and I just go, do I have a peace about saying yes? Like, what I've learned to do is to sit with it and ask the Lord, God, what would it look like for me to say yes to this? And let Him just give me words or give me pictures or give me like maybe it's a roadblock or maybe it's a green pasture, like God, what would it look like for me to do this? Maybe He'll give me specifics, like I can envision myself there. I can envision the people's faces. Or maybe He gives me a picture of my kids and that's saying, you need to stay home that weekend,
Yeah.
It's not really a formula. I think it's just learning to pay attention to the season that I'm in and to what God is saying. Practically, I need to talk to my husband about it.
Yeah.
Because I have a tendency to go, oh yeah, that's a no-brainer. I'll just go with it. But I really just need to go, hey, babe, what do you think about this? Like,
Yeah.
I really feel strongly that I need to, but what's your feedback? And even also, I think when you have a vision for what God's called you to, you also ask the question, does this fall within that vision? Like, is this in line with what I know I'm meant to be doing?
So just for people listening to this, Meredith's husband is also a wildly talented music producer, songwriter, instrumentalist, all of the above.
Yeah.
So I want to ask a little bit about that because you mentioned talking to him, getting his input.
Right.
Guessing he's not a 3 on the
No,
Enneagram.
he's not a 3. He is a 4.
Okay, so
Yes.
so good compliment there.
Right. Depends on the day, but yes.
More of the emotional,
yes,
type.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about what you call the juggle struggle.
Yeah, the juggle struggle.
How do you do it? Like, you've got your career, his career is going amazingly well as well, and then you've got your 3 kids.
Right.
You've got all this stuff. How do you do the juggle struggle?
Yeah, that is the question. And that's why I've termed it the juggle struggle, because I think it's always going to be a bit of a struggle. It's always going to be a tension. There's always going to be this balancing act of just kind of like, I see this picture of, scales, not like the ones that you stand on, but the ones that you put things in and you balance it out, right? There are going to be seasons in our lives where certain things take precedence. Now, granted, my family will always be my family, and nobody can be Jacob's wife or Maverick, Remy, and Frankie's mom. That's my role and only my role. Whereas there are lots of worship leaders, there are lots of songwriters, but I also understand that what I carry into those situations or those opportunities is unique. And sometimes God will call me to a place because He's given me something specific for those people in that moment, for that time. So I think it's just this learning the tension and understanding that tension isn't a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, because if I'm swinging from a rope, I want tension on that rope. If there's no tension, then I'm falling, like I'm on the ground, right? Yeah. So I think it's this paying attention. That's like the biggest thing. How do I pay attention to what's going on around me? If my family is healthy, if my marriage is in a good place, my kids don't feel like mom's gone all the time, then that releases me into this season of, okay, I can go out on the road and pour out, and then I come back. Because it looks like for me that I'm usually out just on the weekends, and it's usually just one night a week. Like I'll go on a Friday and then come back on a Saturday night, But it is a thing. And I think this is the question that I get the most of, how do you balance everything? And I don't know that it's always going to be evenly balanced. I think it ebbs and flows. And I think you pay attention and you listen to the voice of the Lord and you just go, what is this season supposed to look like? Give me a picture of it for my family. Give me a picture of it for my ministry and my career. And even for just like creating margin, because we all need that. And as a 3, the thing that I struggled with and I have struggled with the most is I can look at my calendar and go, oh, I've got blank spaces. I should fill it. You know, I should write here. I should do a podcast. I should go on the road. Yeah. But sometimes you just need those blank spaces to get away and go, I'm going to clean out my closet today, you know, or I'm just going to sit with the Lord. I'm going to go for a walk and I'm just going to ask him to kind of download some vision into my spirit so that I can know like what the coming days, what the coming weeks are supposed to look like. But even this week, I've started something with my kids. Like my boys go to school, they're 2nd grade and kindergarten, and we have a 3-minute drive to school. And so when we've gotten in the van the last few days, I'm going to be like, guys, I'm going to pray over you right now. And one of the things that I start out saying is, good morning, Holy Spirit. Good morning, Father. Good morning, Jesus. What do you want to do today? What do you want to show us today? How do you want to like use our lives to demonstrate your love to the people that we come in contact with? And I think when you just start your morning as simple as that and you go, good morning, God, what do you want to do through me today? What do you want to show me today? Then it changes the trajectory of your day and even of just the way that you view all the things that God has entrusted to you. Because I know that God has entrusted my family to me. I know that God has entrusted this ministry to me. And it is an ebb and a flow. And I need the Holy Spirit's help to know, what does today look like? And how do I lean into that and be present in this moment?
That's so good, man. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. It definitely speaks to me even right now. Another element of, the juggle struggle.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about this tension? We get questions from people pretty often, people listening to the show and people that have come to our academy events, different things, asking, how do you balance this idea of being like an artist and like personal branding and like getting music out there and having that identity, but then also in the worship space, like making sure that everything is pointing to God.
Yeah.
Like that's always a struggle that so many people deal with. So what would be what's your way of thinking about that?
Well, thankfully I have a team of people around me that are really good at kind of marketing and branding, but it took me a while to get used to that idea that I'm a brand. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm a person, So that was really weird for me. And I definitely struggled with it at first. And I remember like countless people when I first got started, like going into a writing room and the last thing they said was write a hit. And I'm like, is that what we're doing here? Is that what we're really trying to accomplish? Like, I understand that like hit songs sell records and that's kind of your thing, but I'm trying to reach people where they are. And I'm just trying to be honest with the songs that I'm writing. So I think it is definitely a tension, Seth, and I don't know the answer necessarily, but I do know that God has called me to be faithful with what he's entrusted to me. And everybody else around me has different jobs. My manager, my record label people, my booking agent, they have different jobs and I don't need to worry about their jobs. Like we check in, we have conversations, we have vision talks, but I need to focus on, am I conveying the message that I know that God has put on my life and the anointing that he's entrusted to me to carry. And I think that, social media is such an interesting thing and marketing is such an interesting thing and they all have their place. And there's nothing wrong with those things. But whenever I go and I teach at worship events or worship conferences, I always say to people, like, God has given you a platform and he wants you to be visible. If he didn't give you a visible role, then you'd be behind a desk somewhere or behind a camera somewhere or, behind a curtain, I don't know. But he's actually put you on a platform for a reason. He's entrusted that position to you. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what am I doing with my visibility? And my answer needs to be, for me, I want my answer to be, I'm not drawing people to me. I'm not pointing people to Meredith Andrews. But they see me, but I want them to look past me. Like, I want them to have a greater encounter with God because of my music. I want them to experience the presence of the Lord in their car or when they're washing dishes, because I've spent time and I've fought some hidden battles, and I've myself cultivated this intimate relationship with the Father. And so songs come out of that place, and I'm able to share them, not because I want people to go, oh, Meredith Andrews is my favorite artist, but because I want them to go, I've experienced the presence of the Lord in a way that I never have when I listen to these songs, and it's drawn me to worship. And so I think it's just about, what is my philosophy? What is my why? What is the reason that I'm doing this? And especially as worship leaders, my close friend Andy Rozier always talks about how we're tour guides. He tells a story about going to Israel and having a woman who was like not even 5 foot tall. She was the tour guide, and every location she knew all the facts and every detail about what happened there, and could point to the scripture that was related to it, and made all these places come alive. But at the end of the day, like, they weren't thinking about the tour guide. They were thinking about what they experienced at that location. And that's us as worship leaders. We're just facilitating what God has entrusted to us and inviting people into this place to go, God wants to meet you right where you are. And it is definitely a struggle, Seth, because we live in such a celebrity-driven culture. And people, it can be such an illusion, though. And I talk about another illusion. Like, when I look on Instagrams, people's social media, and I go, what's real? Like, I want to be real. But you also have to be careful with that too, because I have to protect my family as well. And so it's such a complex thing. But I think at the end of the day, I want to just say, okay, am I being faithful to the call that God has put on my life to steward the things that He's entrusted to me, and to carry out like what I know that He's assigned to my life?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's even helpful at all, because I feel like it's an open-ended conversation. It's going to look different for everyone. But I know that, like, I'm not trying to be a celebrity, but I struggle with that too. Just looking at other, it's that comparison game, and like, maybe I should be doing more. Maybe it should actually look like this. But then when I quiet my heart and I get alone with God, and I go, God, what do you say about me? And what do you think about me? And what is it supposed to look like for my life? Because it's not supposed to look like this guy or this girl. It's unique.
Yeah.
And so I think we can pull ideas from other people, but at the end of the day, I think God has a strategy for each of us individually. And it's not competing with anybody else, because we're all just meant to stay in our lane and run alongside each other and champion one another. And I think that's something that helps us with comparison, is going, I'm going to champion the next person. I'm going to celebrate what they're doing, and not just always post about what I'm doing, but I'm going to post about what other people are doing that's impacting my own heart, and taking me into a deeper encounter with God.
Yeah.
I want to celebrate my friends. I want to celebrate you and what God's doing through you, and I think that's really important, because we can get so pigeonholed on, this is my thing, this is what I'm meant to do, and that's good. It's good to be driven and focused, but I also want to be aware of what God's doing all over the world, and to champion these other people that I know are making an impact for the kingdom.
Yeah, so good. Can you talk a little bit about a new record that you've got out?
Yeah.
Well, new as of March 8th.
Yes.
Not sure when this is airing, but it is out everywhere. And why was this a different one than anything that you had done before?
Yeah, so this was my first live project that I'd done, just me. I'd done live worship albums with Vertical before, because we were there for 10 years. And
for context, Vertical Church.
Yeah, Vertical Church.
Chicago.
Well, it's Vertical Worship, yes. Yeah. And then they're based in Chicago.
Yeah.
So we were there for a while, amazing people. And now being at The Belonging, we've done the live album with them. But this was the first time that I'd ever done like a Meredith Andrews project live worship record. And it was scary, but it was awesome. And it's different than anything I've done before, but I feel like it captures just who I am and where I am right now. And I've just been longing to release songs that the church can sing and to actually capture their voices on it. You know, you can hear people singing in the background, and I love that so much. It just felt like church. We recorded it at Rocketown, which is where the belonging meets. So it was just kind of an extension of church for me. And yeah, really, really sweet night.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we'll talk a little bit about kind of how you did it and the live recording process in our deep dive, which listeners can, if they're really interested in how that is, and maybe they're interested in what goes into making a live record, how do you make a live record, they can go to madeitmusic.com, go to the show notes page, and the video will be there. So we'll dive into that if that's cool with you.
Great. Sounds good.
I do want to ask a little bit about, because in some ways it sort of looks from the outside like a little bit of maybe a rebranding.
Yeah.
Is that an intentional thing? And what are your feelings that kind of go along with that?
Yeah, I think it's intentional, but it's also a natural progression. When I've signed my record deal 11 years ago, I remember being in a radio studio somewhere in like East Tennessee, and someone asking me on air, "Are you a worship leader or are you an artist?" And I was like, "Well, why do I have to choose? You know, I feel like I'm both. I feel like I have the creative element of being an artist, but also wanting to see people engage with God on a deep level. And that's like the heart of the worship leader in me. And I think I kind of found a little bit of a marriage of the two as I've gone on, because my journey kind of started off as, it was so weird. I worked at a church. I led worship at a church, but all the songs that I was writing were more story songs or radio songs. And I still will tell stories before those songs when I sing them. And I love that. I love getting to connect with people and engage and just relate to them. Like, this is what I was going through, and God gave me this song and it carried me through that season. Like the song we wrote, Soar, is one of those songs, you know? Yeah. But as I've just kind of gone along my journey and led worship more and more, that's the thing that fires me up more than anything, because I can tell stories all day long. And I know that God uses that, but it's when people encounter God's presence is when they're changed forever. And so that's what I want to be a part of. And I love it so much. So I think, it was just this natural progression of, okay, I've been a worship leader for all these years. I'm growing in my gifting as far as writing songs for the church. And now I think it's just time to like overcome some fears and release those songs and invite people into that experience.
What you talked about, there's being some kind of fears surrounding this process. What are the fears about?
I think the fears were, it is a bit of a rebranding. Like, I don't want to give people whiplash, like, wait a second, she was this and now she's that. But I don't think people think about it that much. And maybe I kind of stress about that, but I don't think people are thinking like, oh, Meredith was an artist and now she's a worship leader. That just kind of like messes up my day. And I'm like, no, it does not that big of a deal. But I think I had a fear of just going, I am kind of stepping into some new territory. And like so many of my friends are worship leaders, but it's that insecurity of like, will I be counted among their ranks, or will I be received like they're received? Or will people understand like what I'm trying to accomplish here? And again, like, I can't live my life based on how people react or respond. And I want to go back, Seth, because we were talking about even just like arriving in as an illusion, and even just like talking about your journey, right? One of the things that God showed me early on when my first album released, there was all this hype around it, and Billboard had written this magazine article about this release, and I started to believe my own hype, and I was like excited. Of course, I was excited and expectant. But when it released, I kind of watched a lot of other artists that had signed the same time as me just like take off. And I just felt like I was kind of like putzing along, And I was really frustrated and hurt. And I remember having this conversation with God one day. And I was like, God, I thought you called me to this. And he so tenderly just like slapped me upside the head. And I was like, why would you think that just because you didn't sell a certain number of records that I didn't call you to this? And that was the beginning for me of God just starting to redefine success in my eyes. Like, because before I thought, oh, I've got to sell a certain amount of records and I've got to be received by a certain number of people and it's got to look like this in order for it to be successful. But I would much rather my life and what I do and what I release, I would much rather it be successful in the kingdom of God. And to me, that looks like it having a depth before it has a breadth, right? Of having this, like, I've sown this seed into the ground. I've watered it with my tears. I've spent time in God's presence. I have gotten a hold of his heart for these people. I've listened to, what he's saying right now and what he wants to release right now through these songs. And just having, like, the Lord always said to me, you take care of the depth and I'll take care of the breadth. Don't worry about whether or not it looks successful, because I believe that success in the kingdom of God doesn't look like numbers or accomplishments. Success in God's eyes looks like obedience and faithfulness. And so, when I come back to even just these fears and these insecurities, I just have to surrender them and go, Lord, I am afraid that it won't add up to X, Y, and Z, or that, I won't get on a certain tour, or it won't have, however many plays on Spotify, like that. Those are like, they feel silly. And when you really take a step back and go like, who's in control of my destiny? It's not me. It's not my record label. It's the Lord. So I have to learn to hold that with open hands and go, God, I'm just going to be faithful with what you've entrusted to me. And you can do with it whatever you want to do with it. And even if it only reaches like a handful of people, if I was obedient, then that means that I was successful.
Yeah. Man, that's so good. And I love seeing that you very much share our philosophy here at Full Circle Music, which is when you achieve anything or have anything awesome happen, that you turn around and give back, and you don't hold it close. You don't. Right. It's not like a clenched fist mentality. You're coaching other girls who are worship leaders from all around the world, which is amazing. Can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe like what are some of the struggles that you're seeing people? I mean, it's largely, we kind of all have the same struggles, no matter what level we're at. Totally. Like, even from the person just starting out, they've just got on stage for the first time, all the way to, where you're at. Yeah. I would imagine, is there some degree where like everybody is sort of thinking and feeling the same thing? Oh,
for sure. Which has been refreshing for me, even to just kind of look back and share all the things that I've just shared with you, with these girls that I'm able to pour into and love on, and they pour into me too. Like, it's so cool when you have a community of people around you, even though you're talking about worship circle, like, a lot of these girls I haven't even met in person. It's this online community, and we are face to face through a computer screen once a month, and we all share our highs and lows for the month. Like, this is kind of where I'm at. This is what I'm walking through. These are the things that God is doing. This is what I'm wrestling with. And turns out a lot of the things that my girls will talk about are transition. And I don't mean like transitioning from one song to another, but just being in a place of transition, of going, I know that there's something, like, I feel drawn away from this thing and going into a new season, or I feel like I'm supposed to lay down this platform for a season or whatever. Transition comes up a lot. Relationships come up a lot, like even just, navigating relationships within a church staff or volunteers. And, the reality is the majority of the girls that I'm mentoring are in churches where the foundation of their team are volunteers, which is awesome. But, there's a lot to navigate with that. And how do you call them to a place of excellence, but also understanding that they're giving of their time and taking away from maybe work or family just to be there and to serve. And, but yeah, it's all very like, just because, I live in Nashville and I sing all over the country doesn't mean that I can't relate with those girls, because we're all just trying to be faithful where God has us, and all trying to navigate the juggle struggle of family and ministry and what does this look like? So it's been so refreshing to me and challenging for me, to even dig deeper and to go, God, would you just give me vision and would you give me wisdom and knowing how to just encourage these girls? Because I really believe that it's less about a career or less about, what we can easily make it on the surface, and so much more about what is my foundation, what is my why, what is my philosophy, am I cultivating this intimacy with the Lord? Because if I'm not a worshiper, then how can I expect to be a worship leader? So I'm not just a song leader. I'm not just a musician. I have to have this element of, I know what God is doing right now, and I'm flowing with Him, and I'm partnering with Him to minister to His people, and to just go, God, do what only you can do. And so I want to encourage my girls in that too, just going just spend time with the Lord and let everything flow from that place. And of course, there's practical things too.
Yeah. I love it. Well, man, this has been such a good conversation, and I don't want to shut it down, except for the fact that I know we've all got lots of struggles we're juggling and different things.
Sure, for sure.
So we're going to dive into our lightning round if you're ready.
Let's do it.
Lightning round.
First question, favorite city to play in?
Favorite city. Can I say Jerusalem?
Have you played in Jerusalem?
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So this is supposed to be short. Okay.
No, that's good.
In November, we went to Israel for the first time, my husband and I, and we got to play on the southern steps, which is of the temple. And it was insane. It was my favorite experience ever.
It's amazing. My parents are actually there right now.
That's
awesome. Sending me
I'm
pictures.
jealous.
Me too.
Yeah.
Favorite thing to do to unplug from music?
Oh, I love being outside. In the summer, this is so random and I don't get to do it a ton, but I love paddleboarding.
Yeah.
Where you stand and you just use a paddle and you go down the river, you go, if you're in we've done a few cruises where we lead worship for, and we go to these really clear water beaches, and paddleboard. And
Yeah, I was going to say, where do you have a favorite place to paddleboard?
I don't know, probably Cozumel or something, but
Okay.
I wouldn't, but I say that I don't go to Cozumel. I've only been there once, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, the last place that I paddleboarded was in Roatan, Honduras, which is a little island off the coast of Honduras, because we did a marriage cruise in February. So I found a paddleboard and I was happy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Quick sidebar on that. One of the, you have these little highlights of your life, and it sounds like Jerusalem was kind of that for you.
Yeah.
A lot of our listeners kind of are aware of this, but my first record when I was a little kid was by this band Newsboys called Take Me to Your Leader.
Yeah.
And my first time paddleboarding was with Peter.
Are you
Furler
serious? That's crazy.
in Panama City Beach.
That's amazing.
And it was just so surreal for me. This was after I had already done a record with him and knew him pretty well. But still, that was one of those moments. Shout out, Peter, if you're hearing this or seeing this.
Totally. That's awesome.
But yeah, just those things that are this is so cool.
Yep.
And I sucked so bad at it.
It's okay. You can try again.
Yeah. I'll try it at Percy Priest Lake, maybe, where there's no stingrays underneath.
That's probably a good, little less pressure.
A little less pressure. One thing you wish would change in the music industry?
Oh, gracious. Are we talking about music industry in general or Christian music industry?
Either.
Okay.
Whatever comes to mind first.
Okay. This might be kind of weighty, but long story short, I had a meeting with a friend who's been in the music industry for 30, 40 years, just picking his brain. And he told us a story about how when Bill Gaither signed his first record contract, it was basically copied over from whatever mainstream label was over this Christian label. And I don't remember what, but it was that label was marked out. His label was put in. That guy's name was marked out. Bill Gaither's name was put in, right? And I just believe that for Christian music, God has a strategy that's different from the world. And we've tried to pattern it after the world. We've taken the contracts that look good in the world's kind of economy and philosophy and try to implement it into what I think God has a strategy for. And I think that's actually mostly rooted in the local church. That's a whole nother conversation, probably for a whole nother day. And I don't know if you wanted that deep of an answer, but I just think that God has strategy for the music industry when it comes to his kids. And I think we need to tap into that a little more.
That's so good. That is a whole conversation
Yeah,
in and of itself.
for sure.
We'll go to a little more lighthearted
Great
question.
Sounds good.
Most awkward or embarrassing stage moment
Oh
ever?
my gosh. It's probably like I've forgotten lyrics so many times, but I've slipped down. I remember one time I was on tour with Natalie Grant and they announced my name and I was wearing these heels that were really slick and it was like on a hardwood floor stage. Definitely like skied in. Like I didn't fall down, but I was like, trying to catch my balance. And then even just like on that family life marriage cruise I was telling you about, we were in this lounge that didn't have any like confidence monitors, and like I gave all my brain cells to my children, so I need those things even for like lyrics of my own songs. So we started singing this song called Deeper and that I'd written, and the band launched into it, and I could not remember the first lyrics to save my life. So I was like, guys, I like waved off the band. I looked at Jonathan, my drummer. I was like, how does this song go? I was like, what's the first line? He's like, something about kicking up dust and dirt. I'm like, got it. Great. Sorry, everyone. As you were. But I've just kind of learned not to take myself so seriously because that stuff happens all the time and the Lord keeps me humble that way. So it's
I
good.
love it. I absolutely love that. And then lastly, do you have a book that you would recommend to people who are looking to maybe get into music?
Oh, a book to get into music.
It doesn't have to be a music book. It could be just a life book too.
A life book that comes to mind immediately, I started nodding before you even finished your sentence, it's called Anonymous. It's by a woman. I've never met her before. I think her name is Alicia Britt Cole, Chole. And the subtitle is Jesus' Hidden Years and Yours. And that book, Seth, like turned my world upside down because she's just talking about how Jesus lived 30 years of his life in obscurity and only had 3 years of public ministry. And in our day and age, like looking at that, we'd be like, well, that would pretty much be considered a failure. Yeah. But what was happening in those 30 years and the way that he was cultivating his walk, his life, his relationship with the Father was what set up the power of his and the fruitfulness of his public ministry. So that book, hands down.
Yeah. Well, that's a great recommendation for people wanting to get into anything music related or on a platform or whatever. So
absolutely.
I love that.
Absolutely.
New record, Faith and Wonder.
Yeah.
People can find it everywhere. How can they find you on social media?
Instagram, it's Mere Music, MERE Music. Meredith Andrews was taken. So, but I kind of also like that it's like Mere also spells like mere, which means, I don't know, it's like only music if Jesus isn't in it, right? That's how I get to. But anyway, that's Twitter and Instagram. And then Facebook, I guess. Yeah, facebook.com/Meredith Andrews, meredithandrews.com.
Yeah. Well, we'll link in the show notes to all that so people can find you.
Thanks,
and Seth. We're going to be doing a deep dive on how you recorded your new record, Faith and Wonder, as well. So people can find that at madeitmusic.com in the show notes. So,
sweet.
Meredith, thanks so much for being on the Made It Music podcast.
My privilege. Thanks for having me.
Hey, what's up? Thanks for hanging out on this YouTube video with us. In case you didn't know, this is from the Made It Music Podcast Season 2. We have a ton of awesome guests that come on the show, all music business professionals, to share their knowledge and experience with you. So if you want to subscribe to not miss any future episodes, hit that subscribe button on YouTube and you'll be notified about all of them. And in case you didn't know, we do a deep dive for every episode where we go really in depth on a certain topic from each podcast episode. So sign up right here to get free unlimited access to all of those deep dives from our podcast. And if you want to watch another Made It Music podcast video, click here.